Hello everybody, this is Bwammo from DragtheBar, and today we're going to be going over dakota-xx's play, also known as Debbie. She is a forum mod for CardsChat. This is a $11 game, single table tournament, standard speed, and she's playing at PokerStars for this one. I'm going to break this down, just as I did with my other buddy, and basically pretend as if I was talking directly to her and coaching her one-on-one. So let's begin. Not really much reason to play this here. Facing a min-raise. I mean, I know that min-raise doesn't mean very much, but we're just going to be playing out of position, completely out of position, probably against 3 other players. So it's just not a very profitable spot to be in usually. So this is a good fold. And we're just going to blaze on through the hands that I feel are not worthy, like this here. I mean, potentially, I can understand maybe even making a small little re-raise here, if this is like a multi-table tournament or something where we really desperately need to get chips. But usually in these games, it's a little bit best to play tighter, especially in the standard speeds, because you have even more time to wait. And folds the queen 10, good. Alright, so we got a raise to 3x, and we've got 1470 in our stack. If there was maybe, if she only had maybe like 1200 chips here, my favorite play would be to just shove right here, because a 3x really doesn't mean that much. I mean, it's just somebody playing position. I mean, he could potentially have a good hand, but we've got 9s. The difficulty with flatting here in general is that we're going to be playing a pot out of position, and the odds of cards flopping above a 9 are just bad. I mean, bad for us. So if like a 10 flops, I mean, it's not even a very high card, but if we bet and get called, we're now playing scared for the rest of the hand. So, typically I wouldn't flat call here, but this is very few chips. 40 chips isn't very much, so it's okay to try and just play the hand here. And the reality is the person who's raising might have a hand like ace-8 or even a suited connector, like, I mean, as weak as jack-8 suited or something like that, if they're kind of a looser player. We don't really know anything about them yet in the tournament, so we can't really make any assessments, but we can just kind of hope that they're a little looser, because usually they will be in this position. So if we have a hand like that and they ended up hitting their 8 or something, we could maybe get some value for it down the road. So flatting here is okay. And she does. And the dreaded ace flops. So because there was a pre-flop raise, we can't not put them on an ace. So we'll just go ahead and check here. If they check back and the turn comes safe, we should be betting. They checked back. But the turn is not safe in any way. This guy checks again. So yeah, she's definitely got to check. The problem, like, I mean, this leech person who raised doesn't necessarily have to have an ace or a king, but it's very hard to assume both him and the small blind don't have an ace or a king. So we'll just go ahead and let this one go. Got some aces and a raise to 5x. And this guy does not have that many chips behind. 1,000 is a fair amount, but there's a couple different ways to play this. If we're assuming that the person who's raising is just a gambler, then probably a ship is the right play, because you're going to get called all in by whatever they just raised with. I mean, even as weak as like king jack suited, just because they want to play all in, that's why they raise so much. But because it's an $11 game and not like a $1 game or 3 or 5, usually people are not quite as happy to take all-ins like that. So that being the case, I'm probably not going to shove here. I'm probably just going to re-raise this a bit to make sure I'm just playing against 1 or 2 people. Because the last thing you want to do is flat here and have the original limper from under the gun and the other guy play, and then you're playing in a 4-handed pot and just everything is weird and scary unless the board comes down completely dry, which it never does. So yeah, I'm definitely re-raising here. Now, as far as how much, well, like I said, I don't want to make everybody fold. but I would like to have one or two other players in this hand. So maybe to like 300 or something like that. It does become a little obvious that we have a good hand if we do that type of thing. However, it's even more obvious if you just shove that you have a good hand too. So what we're doing is we're just allowing them to make a little mistake by going up to 300 or maybe even 250 if it feels like these are tighter players. But again, we haven't been on this table for very long, only like 8 hands or something. So let's see what she does. And she ships it. And I'm guessing she's probably going to see folds all the way around. Yeah. Except for the guy who was all in pre-flop. So a little bit of a mistake there, but not that bad, because you're still going to get called by some things that you want to get called by, like lower pocket pairs and stuff. So we got threes. There's a limp in front of us, so that means that limping here is okay, but we have to be willing to call a raise up to about 120 if we call here. And she has enough chips and everyone else has enough chips that it's okay to go ahead and make this call here. I mean, if we were to flat and somebody behind us races to 120, like we're only going to be putting in another 90, so we're going to be able to win at least 12 to 15 times what we're calling when we hit our set, usually. And she flats and gets another caller, and then a min raise. This is a perfect situation. Got a nice bloated pot, so then when we hit our set, I mean, we're already getting 6.5 to 1 right here, but the other guy who's calling is definitely going to call, so now we're looking at 7.5 to 1, and when we hit a set, we only need 8 to 1 to break even, like mathematically, so we're getting our odds right here. Anything else is just butter. But she folds. That's a curious fold. A bit too tight. Playing a flop with queen 6. Not a very good board to try and fire at. It's not actually a terrible board, but it's just not enough chips in there for it to matter for us. So we'll just go ahead and check it here. And he checks back. So now there's another check. It's very unlikely that this Bwammo, well, however you say that name down there, the guy who limped, that he had a 4. And if he had a 7, he probably would have bet it. If he had a jack, he almost definitely would have bet it. He could have had a hand like 5s, 6s, 8s, and above, and he would have bet it. I mean, he could have had a flush draw and he would have bet it. So there are not very many combinations of hands in which this guy is going to be happy to call bet here. The small blind is the only person that we're kind of afraid of right now. Not really afraid of, just need to be cautious of, because he could easily have that 4. I mean, he could actually have the 7 too, and was just too afraid to do anything with it. But that's just one player that we're going to have position on. So if we bet here and he flats us, we've still got the queen as an overcard. And if he does happen to have some sort of weird draw that he doesn't want to give up, then we are going to win with our queen high usually. So I'm almost always going to be betting here. As far as how much is whatever you think these players are going to fold with. Like if the guy who limped under the gun happens to have king 10, like what do you think it's going to take to make him fold? And I think somewhere around half the pot will do. So, I mean, you could just go to a straight 2x, which is easy. But if you're okay with typing in numbers, I would probably go to about 40 to 50 here. And check, check. So I'm guessing this is probably going to check through, and it does. But yeah, see that little tiny bet right there on the turn probably would have taken this down. And I know it's not much. 90 chips is not a huge pot in comparison to her stack, but it is a nice little pickup, you know, when you consistently are picking up little pots like this. And it's just nice to be aware of spots that you can abuse like that. If you avoid all those spots, like even later in the game, you're going to be losing some money. Ace 8 to a raise and re-raise. Let's run away. Ace King, 2 limpers. Okay, a common mistake here is to re-raise here so large that they're committing a large portion of their stack, and if you get flatted by somebody who has position on you and you miss, you're just now c-betting with nothing, Well, I mean, you've got something, but it's not super strong. And you're c-betting from out of position, which is always a little more dangerous. So if you raise here to like 200 or 250 or something like that, and one of these players behind you flats, or even both of them, which is entirely possible, especially if the first person flats. If the first person flats, it makes the second person flatting a lot easier because there's more chips in the pot, and they love family pots. Everybody does. So let's assume she raises to 200 or 250 here. We'll call it 250 because that would be the worst possible scenario. And both of these players call. The pot size is going to be 750 plus a little 25 in the small blind, so we're looking at 775. And she's only going to have, what is that, 1350 behind. The ratio there is a little skewed. So now if she c-bets like somewhere around a third to a half the pot, it's going to be committing so many chips that if anybody flats, it's really hard to get away from this hand now. Like, her desire to win this pot is just so extreme. So I wouldn't really advise checking here, because then you're just letting these people get in for free. You're not making them pay anything extra, because I mean, you have a really good hand here. I mean, honestly, she could go all in right here and it'd be okay with me, because you're picking up 175 chips, which is more than 10% of your stack. And if somebody calls, then oh well, they might have a hand like ace queen, ace jack suited, or something like that. It wouldn't be the worst play in the world, but I think it would be a better play than raising to 250. That all being said, I would love to charge these people money, but I don't want to commit too much of my stack. So what I would probably do here is raise up to like just a little bit to increase the pot size, so that when I do hit, which I am going to hit about a third of the time, it really gives me a chance to get value for what I just did. Like if these people have ace-6 offsuit right now, or something of the same sort, maybe king-8 suited or something, and you raise to 250 here, or 200, they might fold because they're like, oh, well, it's clear this person has a good hand, so I'm just going to go ahead and get away. You raise smaller, it's very hard for them to fold. So then when you both hit that ace or that king, now you're not only going to get the chips that they called pre-flop, you're going to get even more from them. So this is a great spot to just kind of pop the pot up a little bit. And honestly, I've min raised here a few times just because I want to increase the pot size, and I didn't have enough chips to raise any bigger. But right here, she has enough chips to throw in another 75, so I'd probably raise to like 125 here. But she goes to 200, and that's a common mistake. A lot of people do this, and I mean, even a lot of good players find themselves in this situation. But the difficulty is, it comes post-flop. It's not now, because I mean, if they all fold, they feel like they made a good play by raising to 200. Oh yes, I got everybody to fold. My ace-king was the best hand. But you're avoiding profitable situations by taking a less profitable situation. And they all fold. Sixes on the button. Folds to us. Definitely raising here. Somewhere between a min raise and 3x. Usually for me, it's a little closer to a min raise. I'll probably go to like 120 or something like that here. I like that number. But it doesn't really matter. It's kind of personal preference. Everybody has enough chips to play. It's just kind of how much do you want to raise to? How much do you think is effective? And she went to 140. Perfect. Pretty good board to continuation bet on. No straight draws. There is a flush draw, but we've got a diamond, so it's less likely that they've got diamonds. The king gives us something to represent. So yeah, I'm almost for sure going to be c-betting here. As far as how much, like I said, there's no draws down there, so probably not very much. I mean, if they want to call with an ace-high here, that's fine. I don't care. Like, they could call with ace 3, 4, 5, and all they've got is 3 outs. If they had an ace-8 or ace-9 or ace-10, okay, then it's kind of a problem. But that means they still have only 6 outs plus the running straight draws and all that crap if they've got a ace-10 or better. So we're betting against 6 outs in theory, but usually we're going to be betting against 3 outs here, unless they happen to have a hand like queen-jack, and for whatever ungodly reason they're going to be flatting here. Like maybe queen-jack with a queen of diamonds, and they just feel like they've got enough. But again, we're betting against 6 outs in general. So you don't have to bet that much. I mean, 6 outs is decent if you're taking it all the way to the river, but we're just taking it to the turn. Like, we have the ability to fire again on the turn if we want to. Unfortunately, that 7 is higher than us, so if we bet here and get called, we're probably not always going to be able to fire again on the turn. Like, I mean, even if the turn comes like a 2 or a 3 or a 5 or some sort of dud, we're not going to be capable of firing again because they might have had a random 7 that just didn't feel like we had a king, so they called us, and they didn't raise us because their hand wasn't good enough. And if we fire again on the turn, like, they might be very likely to call us again unless we bet really big, in which case we're just committing a lot of our stack. It's just this cumulative effect. So we have to avoid usually betting on the turn because of that 7. So that being said, I would take that 6 out, and I would kind of just, in an imaginary world, increase it to about 8 to 9 as to what I'm betting against. Just because of the issues that we have on the turn. So 9 outs, is only going to be hitting about a sixth of the time on the turn. So we don't have to bet that much to ruin their odds. I mean, you can bet 100 chips here, and it's making it 4 to 1 on them. They're not going to be hitting 25% of the time in any world, no matter what they have. I mean, they could have a flush draw here with 2 overs, and then they'll finally get there. I mean, then that would be proper odds. But that is worst case scenario, and we can never assume worst case scenario. But here I'd probably be betting about what I raised to pre-flop, just because I find it a little weird usually to raise to a certain amount pre-flop and then bet on the flop less than that amount. I mean, I do it occasionally, but on average, it's a good thing to avoid. So here, probably going to raise to that 1-4, bet that 140 again that I raised to pre-flop, or that she raised to pre-flop. And 150, that's fine. Right in the same wheelhouse. And we get called, and that's not bad. I mean, it's still very likely that this person has the type of hand that, like an ace-x hand, or potentially a 7, and maybe we're just going to have to eat it here. Or they had that flush draw. So we'll see what happens here. Check. So like I said, because of the 7, it's very difficult to bet here again. So I'm probably just going to check it here again. Yeah. 4 hits. That probably was pretty good for us, honestly. Like, if they did have an ace-3 or an ace-4, they're probably going to call a bet. If they had the 7, they're probably going to come out betting here, unless they're just a really passive player. If they had the flush draw and they bet here, we're going to call that. So basically, if we get bet at here, I'm going to call. And if they check, I'm probably going to bet small enough so that a 2, a 3, or a 4 will call us. They check. So here I'm probably just going to bet the same amount that I bet on the flop again. So we'll bet 150. And this is not to make people fold. I don't want them to fold. I'm confident my hand is ahead right now. I just want value. I want them to call me with ace high if they want to. Like, just look me up. Be curious. And if you bet 150 here and they happen to have ace 10 of diamonds, they might still call. So I'll probably bet at 150. But she checks, and they had the 4. So I'm pretty confident that if she was to have bet there 150, she could have just picked up 150 chips really easily. I mean, if this guy's calling 150 on the flop with nothing, he's definitely going to be calling when he hits his pair. So a little miss of value there, but that's okay. Alright, so we got king 8 here. And this guy seems to be playing more hands than he should be. I mean, that previous situation, he flatted ace-4 offsuit and didn't do anything aggressively. So the hands that he could have here are very wide. So I'm definitely going to find myself betting here, because the last thing I want to do is check and have jack 9 randomly hit a 10 on me, or 10-9 hit a jack on me, or whatever other combination. And if you check here, you're also allowing a potential flush draw to hit on the turn. And not that I assume he's going to have clubs, but that he has a club. And if he has a club, and we check here and he picks it up on the turn, now he's got this weird outs. Like, let's say it's the 9 of clubs and he happens to have the 10 of clubs in his hand. he's got the jack as a straight and all his other clubs, and we just created a weird situation from out of position that we don't necessarily want to deal with. So I'm probably going to come out betting here. How much? Probably about 100 chips. And she goes 80. That's totally perfect. Gets called. So when the call happens, I mean, look, we could pretend he had a flush draw, but it's very likely that they had a queen. And honestly, based on the ace-4 that we just saw, it's likely he just had a ace-x type of hand, like maybe an ace-10 or even an ace-9 that just was really stubborn. So this right here doesn't, I mean, we did hit 2 pairs, so we're pretty secure in that. So if we assume they don't have the flush, we should usually go ahead and bet here. And the problem with checking when that flush hits is if we check and they bet, we have not given ourselves any opportunity to weed out that flush. Whereas if we bet here a little bit and they just go all in or they raise real big, we can maybe get away from this hand. So probably betting here. Because the 8 doesn't increase the straight draw chances, probably going to make it a little smaller, somewhere around 130. 180, that's fine. If she thinks this guy's going to be willing to put it in. And honestly, he's a little loose, so 180 might be the right play. And he does call, so that's cool. But then there's that flush. So we'll just check it here, and hopefully he doesn't go all in. And check back, and he happens to have queen 10. So yeah, that 180 bet on the turn was actually perfect because of the type of player this guy was. Looking at this right here, I'm probably going to call this if it gets to me. If it folds around to me, I'm probably going to call. But we get a shove, so we'll just let it go. And the reason for that is he was a loose player who just lost a big pot, and now he has less than 10 big blinds. There's a good chance he's just shipping it wide. And ace-9 is very good against whatever the hell he had. Nope, don't want to call a shove with queen 10. Don't want to call a raise with king 5. Okay, so here there's 150 out there, which wouldn't be a bad pickup. Ace-3 is, I mean, really, if you want to raise here, it's not terrible, but it's so borderline. Like, my personal range here is somewhere around ace-5 offsuit. It changes depending on the stack sizes of everybody, but everybody here has enough chips so that if she was to raise, like, the guy with 900 could shove pretty easily, and it made a really hard fold for her. And the other 2 players both have enough chips that they could, in theory, flat this. So it's just a weird range of stacks that I'm probably just going to go ahead and let this go. And she does. Terrible hand. Alright, we got 5s. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so this leech guy raised again. And he seems to be raising a bunch. Because he's raising a bunch, I see 405 chips out there. I see pocket 5s in my hand. And I just think to myself, man, I would love to have those things. So I'm finding myself all in here more often than not. Maybe if I had 1,000 hands on this guy and I realized his steal percentage and pre-flop raise were not in the right range that I'm guessing they are right now. I mean, this is just going on whatever hands I've seen this guy play, but it seems like he's raising a bunch from late position. On top of that, he's also won a lot of chips. So I mean, if you're looking at a game and you don't have your HUD on, or maybe you don't have that many hands on the guy, it's great to go ahead and look back and find out how they got all those chips. Because if they did something dumb when they got all those chips, it's a little bit easier to assume that they're making a semi-dumb play here. Let's see what happened. He just happened to flop a flush and got paid for it pretty well. So yeah, and based on the fact that he, way back here, completed with king 3 suited, he's probably a little looser than normal. So bringing it back to the 5s. And I realize it's a little difficult to do that in-game if you're playing too many games at once, but if you can find some break in all the other games you're playing, to just go ahead and look back at how somebody got all of these chips it's a really good idea. So yeah, based on all of that, I'm definitely all in here now. But she folds. And I mean, this honestly, 405 chips, that's 20% of our 25% of our stack. That's damn sexy. If we were to win that right now, that'd put us up to, what was that, basically 2450, and we would be 800 above the next person closest to us. That's a pretty big gap. That means if we shove here and we win this, because he folds, that is, we could lose to Sunderland, we could lose to RockU66, we could lose to this other Baroian guy, and it would not devastate our stack. Whereas right now, we lose to those people, and it hurts really bad. No, thank you. Alright, so now we got ace-9, and we are in the hijack. Typically, this is a pretty borderline play if the players behind us are loose, and if the players behind us have enough chips to flat us. But in this situation, the person on the button doesn't have enough chips to flat us. I mean, if she was to raise here, it'd be an easy call all in, and probably going to be ahead, or at least coin flipping-ish, in worst case scenario. The guy in the small blind doesn't even have enough chips to really flat us. The guy directly behind us doesn't have enough chips to really flat us. Like, if she was to raise here, what's probably going to end up happening is playing a pot in position against leech 24, or one of the short stacks is going to shove, and she just has to make a call or a fold, depending on the situation. And again, because the guy on the button has so few chips, you can really just ignore him. I mean, she could subtract 745 chips from her stack, and she's still got more than 8 times the big blind, which is acceptable. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be raising this here. Don't have to raise that much, because it's going to be a very effective raise, except for against leech 24. But there's no amount we could raise to make it effective against leech 24 if he wants to play the hand. So we're just kind of minimizing the pot, maximizing our chances of getting some folds by the other people. So I'd probably go to, 350 to 400, somewhere in there. But she folds. And I can almost guarantee that was a mistake. And the other added thing here is, with the ace-3 from before, we were picking up 150 when she had 2100 chips. Less than 10% of our stack. Here, however, 225 when we've got 2030 in our stack. That's more than 10% of our stack. So this little tiny steal here could net us more than 10% of our stack. Definitely worth trying. Alright, so we got a limp from a guy who, let's see, last time he limped, it was a little wide. Ace-3 suited, I believe. And then a shove from this other person. I'm definitely going to be reshipping here. As far as how wide I'd reship, probably down to like ace-9 suited, maybe even ace-8 suited, honestly. It's because I think that the under-the-gun limper is not that strong to have limped. It's possible he's limping a monster, but it's much more possible that he's limping a hand that didn't want to raise. And this guy who's shipping here, it's possible he's got a good hand, but it's also very likely he's got a hand like King 10 suited. So, looking at the fact that it's only going to be costing us 600 chips here if we lose to the other guy, 600 chips away from our stack is going to leave us with 1300. This is a great spot to go ahead and reship. When she flats, which isn't necessarily a terrible play, but we just don't want to make it any easier for this other guy to get in. If this guy was to have like 1300 chips or something like that, he could call the 600, leave himself with 700, and then we're in a weird, awkward situation on the flop. Even with this stack size, he could call it right here, and it's only calling 600 and leaving himself with, would that be 550? And then we have to just go all in or something like that on the flop, and maybe he just happened to hit with whatever crap he had. So it's best to just go ahead and shove here and avoid whatever could happen. Got a great spot. Oh, I got bad beat. What a bummer. Alright, so we got a late position limper. He had a stack that usually should be shoving, but not everybody realizes that. She has 2 cards that are mildly high. If she had Queen 8 here, honestly, I'm probably going to find myself all in. maybe some sort of HUD stats or some sort of other information could change my decision a little bit. But when you've got two cards that are that high and this person limped, like it's very unlikely that they have a hand that's ace-8 or ace-queen, king-queen, which are the only hands that really have us dominated. They would have to have a hand like 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks to have us kind of screwed up. But, I mean, we still got the queen as the overcard if that was the case. And I'm looking at this right here, seeing 375 chips out there. That would be a huge pickup. So yeah, everything about this says I want to go all in. And if she was suited here with queen 7 suited, again, gonna find myself all in. Because that gives us another little chance to win if they do happen to have one of those few hands. There's very few hands that have us completely dominated here. I mean, it's unlikely that they would have a hand like king 7, or in the situation where I was talking about with the queen 8, that they would have king 8 here and make that call all in. Like, that's just a really, really hard and kind of retarded play to make. So, yeah, I'm usually going to be shipping this. And because of the fact that if she looks around the table, the people ahead of her have 1,837 and 1,715, you know, after she loses the small blind, which is usually going to happen, she's going to be below 1,000, and these other people are going to be 1,800, 1,700. Couple that with the fact that there's still 6 players left, she has to be a little bit less risk averse, like be willing to take a little bit of extra risk in order to increase her stack. You pick up this 375 chips right here, like right now, if the other guy folds, that changes everything. Like now we're in a solid 4th place. We're not really far away from the person in 2nd and 3rd place. You know, it makes things a lot easier for us if we win this right here. I'm guessing she checks because this is kind of a loose play. Check, and it's that queen. And she comes out shoving all in. I would have probably checked here, and if this person bets, then decide, am I good, should I go all in, that type of thing. This just direct shove is a little... it's actually not that bad. I mean, you're preventing things that have like straight draws and stuff here from picking up any sort of cards if they check back. And you're making it really hard for somebody with a queen to call. But that's actually why I'm shoving pre-flop. Because if I think they have like queen 8, queen 9, queen 10, hell, even queen jack, and they limped pre-flop, it's very difficult to make a call on a shove with those types of hands. Because she checked, they could so easily have those types of hands, and now they might make that call because they hit. So, yeah, by checking, she created this hard situation. And it's not even that bad to make this shove. But there's just very few things that are going to be ahead of her right here, in general, that didn't raise pre-flop. So I'd probably just check here, let the guys check back, then on the turn make a bet so that I can get some money. Or, I mean, she could have even made a bet here and just got called. That would have been alright too. But he folds, so I'll pick that up. Definitely all in here. There's no reason to not go all in. That guy does not have very many chips. Neither do we. We got a king. Let's go. Yay. Oh, what do we got here? 2s with a raise to 450. Probably not the best place to play this hand. So I'd advise folding this here. A shove from that guy now. And now he min raises. So he shoved before and now he's min raising. Kind of feels like he's okay with playing this here. I could understand shipping here. And I mean, it's a really borderline play. The things to look at here are if we shove here and get folds, which we're really not going to get folds because that guy min raising means he's basically saying I'm willing to play this hand all in. But if we do get folds, we're picking up 525 chips, which would be really sexy. If we shove and get called by that guy, like we don't have anything extra behind that we're going to be alive with. We're going to have like one big blind. So it's basically a straight double up. We're going to be sitting there with like 2,800 chips or whatever. That's not, I mean, that's great. That's great for us. So, this is riding the border in so many ways. And I would lean towards folding in a usual situation. If this was a table where I thought I couldn't get away with a bunch of steals, if I thought that it was just a hard table, all the other players were good, then I'm leaning towards shoving. But if this is a spot where I can abuse people, and it kind of feels like this is kind of a weaker table, so I'm leaning towards folding here because I do not want to coin flip right now, and I feel like that's what is about to happen. And she folds. And he raises big, and he's not a very nice person for that. Definitely shoving here. I mean, 5 big blinds behind. The other guy doesn't have very many big blinds. We do have a queen. Doesn't even matter what we have, honestly. Like, you could have 2-3 offsuit, 7-2 offsuit. You gotta be shoving here. And she does. So now we're sitting here with less than 7 big blinds. The other players are pretty short stacked as well. So if we were to shove here, like, they can't call without losing the tournament. There's 300 chips out there, which is a ton of chips for us. So there's all these reasons to shove. Then you go look at your hand. You figure out what it is, how it does against people who call you all in. 7-8 does pretty well. I mean, they can call with up to 6s and we're coin flipping. They can call with 7s and we're not totally screwed. They can call with ace-2 through ace-6 and we're alright. I mean, if they're going to call with king-2 through king-6, we're alright too, but it's just not that likely that they're doing that. But they're small enough that they might. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of hands that they could be shoving here and we're not totally dominated. Then you add in the fact that we're still 5-handed and only 3 people make the money. This is a pretty good spot to shove. If you can shove right here, pick up 300 chips, now we're going to be at 1660. We've got a pretty nice gap between us and 3rd and 4th and 5th place. We fold here, one of these guys shoves, or maybe just one of them folds. The other one picks up 300 chips. Now we're tied with them. So it's a pretty big chip turnaround. So definitely all in here. But she folds. And see now, look at Sunderland. He's got the same stack size as us. That's kind of a problem. And now we could lose to the guy who just shoved right there. I mean, now he's got the same stack size as us. Like, everybody just picked up chips except Dakota. Gotta raise, king 5 suited. I don't have a problem with shipping here, but this is also a weird spot where I think I would be okay with a stop and go. This guy's been raising a little bit too much, and I don't think he's going to fold here. So whenever you're in that situation where he's not going to fold, but you think you're better than him, if you flat here, you are giving yourself some fold equity on the flop because he's only going to hit a third of the time, and some of the times we're going to be hitting. So this would honestly, a reship or a stop and go would both be okay. A fold here, however, probably isn't the best play, just because we're allowing this guy to continue to abuse us like he has been for a while. Now, if for some reason it feels like he's tightened up in the last couple rounds, I can understand folding here as well. And she folds. It all has everything to do with what his range is and what we're putting him on by making that little 500 raise. That's a great shove here. Get out there. What is this here? Okay, so we're still 5-handed. We don't have any sort of advantage over the 4th and 5th place players. All it takes is one ship from either of them and picking up the blinds, and they're where we are. So then I start looking at what are my odds of taking this down if I ship here. Pretty dang good. Um, if these little guys here call us, they're going to be calling us knowing that their tournament life is on the line. So they're probably going to be calling like 10 to 12% of the time maximum if they're loose players. 15% if they're really loose players. 20% if they're kind of suicidal. But it doesn't seem like either of these guys are suicidal. It seems like they're both kind of standard. So I'd like to assume 12% per person. And then Leech, like his tournament life is not on the line when he makes this call. He does seem a little loose, so maybe I'd put him into 15 to 20% of the range. So I mean, just assuming worst case scenario, we'll give 12% to these little guys and 15%, or we'll give 20% to Leech that they're going to call us. 12 plus 12 is 24 plus the 20, so we're looking at 34%. Drop it down a little bit for reality. We're looking about like 32% of the time we're going to get called here. When we do get called, we're not going to be completely dominated because it's very unlikely that they are going to be calling with Queen 9 and King 9. Those are not in the range that we were just putting them on. King 9 kind of is for Leech, but it's at the bottom of the range. And Queen Jack is not necessarily in the range of these little guys. King Jack is. So there's very few hands that we're going to be called and dominated by. I mean, then there's also the 9s, 10s, Jacks, Queens, Kings, and Aces. But again, that's just not very high percentage of the range. Usually we're going to be called by an ace-x type of hand, in which case we're going to be, 42, 58 against because we're suited and we're connected, and they're usually going to be calling with ace-8 or lower. And if they call with a pocket pair, they can call us with 8s to 2s and we're coin flipping. I mean, hell, even 9s and 10s aren't terrible for us because there's a little bit of dead money in there, and we're suited, we're connected, we'll have a jack as an overcard. So yeah, this is a pretty good spot to shove. And now we're down to four-handed. And this guy's shipping again. He's done this a few times now. Honestly, this seems like a bully play. And then looking at the fact that if she folds here, she's only going to have 6 big blinds, well, 5.5 big blinds, and right after the small blind, going to have even less. And then Sunderland 4 has twice her stack size. Like, we've got a little bit of reason to just risk it here. And really, King 6 suited, King 5 suited is about as bad as I'm going to be going here. So I'm going to be making this call. You make this call and you win. We're now looking at, what's that, 1360 doubled up, so we're looking at 2700-ish. We're right back in this thing. We fold here, we're really on the outskirts. Like, even if we make the money, we're not going to have very many chips in general. So it's going to be just a really hard tournament for us. So this is a great spot to go ahead and make this call. I mean, there's a really good chance that this guy's shoving with something that's like a Queen X, or, I mean, he could even have like an Ace X type of hand, and it's not even mathematically that bad of a call because we're getting 1.2 to 1. Definitely a shove here. And Leech raises to 500 again. Great shove here. Great shove. Got it when you're that short. Especially when you know who she's shoving into. When you're shoving into, like, if you're in 4th place and you're shoving into 3rd place, you're taking chips from the person you don't want to have chips, which is fantastic. He raises it up big again. Raises it up big again. And see, it just looks like he's abusing her. And again. And this might even be a pretty good player who's just taking advantage of a stack situation. And he made a pretty wide call. So yeah, I would be willing to bet this what you want guy is not that terrible of a player, or if he is that terrible of a player, then he's terrible in the right way. And if she was to have known that he was a good player, that king six suited call that I was talking about earlier is even more vital to make. Definitely reship here. Less than half the size of the guy ahead of her. Uh, Leech is kind of aggressive. There's a lot out there. We need to double badly. Gotta ship that. A7 suited is ahead of his range, for sure. So yeah, that was a bit of a mistake there. Pretty big one, honestly. A double up there would just be so big, and King 7 suited or A7 suited is going to win a lot of the time. There's a very good chance that this guy's raising two Broadway cards, in which case, our hand isn't that far ahead. But when you consider the fact that if she folds here and it folds around, we are less than half of Sunderland, and the blinds could go up at any moment, that's a problem. And it's funny I say that, because the blinds went up the very next hand. So now that there's 100 chips out there from the ante, a 25 ante, the adjusted big blind, or rather the big blind, gets adjusted up a little bit. And you take 2/3 of the total pot size, and that's the new big blind, or 2/3 of the ante that's out there. So add 65 to the big blind, and now we're looking at 265 chips as the big blind. She only has 4. That's why that ace-7 suited was just so vital to make that one, and why the king-6 suited previously was a pretty big one as well. So, why she min-raised, I'm not entirely sure. Probably would shove that one. I'm hoping that was a misclick. I mean, while it's nice to get an extra 200 chips, it's not nice to let them in with whatever and let them try and get lucky here. Also, if you ship here and they have something they want to see a flop with, they'll just make the flat call. I mean, we just saw this guy flat call or calling all in for the same amount of chips with king 6 suited. I mean, if he has king 6 suited here, he would have made that call, but instead she just gets 200 extra and maybe folds here. Yeah, so I mean, that's just, it's costing us a little bit. And based on everything I've been saying, this king 10 is definitely good. He's been abusing king 10's not a bad hand. The adjusted big blind is a little bigger now. Sunderland is still almost twice our size. If we fold here, it's just going to create some problems. That all being said, I'm okay with folding here if we were to think that this guy was not so aggressive, but he is. This is certainly a shove, for the same reason that she was shoving the other hands before. It doesn't really matter what our cards are. We need the chips that are out there in the middle. We need them way badly. So now we got that raise. Now we're reshipping here, which is the proper play. And hopefully we're going to win this coin flip. It wouldn't be that wrong if she was to do a stop and go here, because it's very unlikely that this guy's going to actually fold for the extra little bit that we're putting on top. And might even be the right play to make the stop and go. In fact, I say it is the right play to make the stop and go, but it's not that bad to go ahead and reship. And like ace-3 offsuit. I mean, our ace-7 suited was definitely better than this. And if he's raising ace-3 offsuit, there's a good chance he's raising a lot of other things. And we win that. That's nice. And now we're looking pretty good. So it's okay to go ahead and do a little raise here because Sunderland seems kind of tight. This is a spot where I might go ahead and min raise or limp here, hope he checks, and then just kind of take a tiny stab at the flop. Just to keep aggressive, because the last thing you want to do is fold and give this guy 400 chips for free. that note, I'm definitely going to be making a little stab here, probably to the 400, 425, 450, something like that. If we're afraid of being 3-bet all in, then I definitely understand not doing that, but at least try and limp it and see what they'll do. But folding is pretty tight. And now we're in the money. See what happened here. Lead shoves, I got reshoves. That's all standard. So adjusted big blind now is 250. So she's sitting here with 10.5. Really, any way she plays, this is okay. A limp, a tiny little raise, a shove. It's all fine. And because of the fact that she's pretty below these other guys, a shove might be the right move. And no, that's not a very good hand to play here. If she wanted to play this, though, I like to limp a lot when I get three-handed just to see if these guys are going to come back at me for limping. Because if you can find out that they're going to let you limp, you can get away with a lot of things on the button. You limp here, they both check to you on the flop, or just one of them checks to you because the small blind folds. You throw out a tiny little bet, you pick it up, do it again, do it again, do it again, over and over and over again. And they will just, and unless they adapt, you will win a lot of chips for no reason. In hands like 6-4, it's about the worst I would try it with, but usually just some sort of suited connector, maybe like a King 7 suited or a King 6 suited, things like that. I mean, even like a Queen 9 offsuit. Good to just see if we can get in there, because when you hit, it's not that bad. Reshipping here wouldn't be that bad. Folding wouldn't be that bad. Looking at the stack sizes here and just how far we are behind, I'm leaning towards reshipping, because we reship here. He calls us if he wants to call us. We're going to be ahead by a bunch of chips afterwards, and we're going to be in first place, and everything's going to be great. We fold here. We're about half the size of both of these players, and we're just letting people run us over still. But usually what's going to happen is we reship here, and what Yuan will just fold because he doesn't want to play for that many chips. Good shove. And see, he keeps coming with it. This would be a great spot to shove again. And the last thing you want to do is raise, get called, and have Jack 10 suited from out of position. It's a great hand to have in position, but out of position, it's so hard to play. You can't properly use your flush draws or straight draws. You end up just making a shove or a check raise all in, which is weird. Yeah, this is a pretty good fold. And see, like this Queen 3, like if we had limped the 4-6 suited and got away with it, maybe we limp the Queen 3 here and just try and get away with this too. This is about as wide as I would ever try it. Sometimes this is wider than I would try it, depending on the table. But these guys don't seem that aggressive when it comes to limpers, although honestly we haven't seen the limping yet. Nobody's really been limping in this table, so that's why it's great to just try, see what happens. And I mean, you can't really assume it's not going to work unless you've tried it and saw it didn't work. Let's go ahead and replay that hand, see what happens there. He reshipped King 5 suited. That's pretty aggressive. Which is exactly why that King 6 suited from before, and the Ace, whatever that was, suited as well, would have been great calls. And we have to go all in here. There's really no choice. But she folds. At this point, we're so far behind chip-wise that it's just impossible for us to not try this. and assume we're going to actually win the tournament. I mean, if she shoves here and gets called, oh well. We've got a 10 as an overcard to a lot of different things. But there's 675 out there. Like, that's so many chips. Pick that up, now we're looking at like a 2400 chip stack. Now we can actually maybe try and do something. You fold here. Basically, you have to shove on the button no matter what it is. Again. So just do it here when there's only one person who can call you as opposed to two. So now we definitely have to shove this, and that's not good. We're coin flipping, and she loses. Yeah, this game it really just looked like missed a couple spots, a little too tight. Really let people abuse her a little bit down the stretch, and it ended up costing her a decent finish in this tournament. She did make the money, which is great, and usually that's my goal when I go into these things, try and make the money, because you're usually going to make the money about 35 to 40% of the time, and so she succeeded there, but she didn't allow herself enough chips to do anything with after what she made the money. And really the blinds going up at this point just killed her right here. So yeah, that's basically it. And until next time, guys.